Hey there, my name is Mike, and this is The Untrained Artist, where we see just how far we can get using whatever tools we have laying around and a few YouTube videos. So today's project started off about 3-4 weeks ago when I sketched it out on the iPad. Liked how it turned out and decided at some point in the future I was going to do some kind of a much larger version with watercolor, maybe mixed media. So I've been really busy lately working on YouTube video stuff, the technical side of all of this, and it's been a while since I painted, so today I just decided why not. So I sat down at my newly set up desk with all of my new camera angles, my new microphones and everything, and decided to kind of use this project to test it all out. So what I did was I just did it on a 6x9 piece of Canson Heritage with my normal paint, and I think it turned out okay. It didn't turn out quite like I had imagined, and I think really what I needed to do was go over it with some kind of a colored pencils or something. Unfortunately, by the time I realized that, I had already taken down all 4 of the cameras, pulled the cards out, and was already starting to transfer files. So live and learn, maybe for next time. Until then, let's get into it.
Welcome back, everybody. Just going to pre-wet some of the colors here because they don't always want to cooperate. And the colors we're going to be using today are lemon yellow, sap green, a little ultramarine and cerulean, and then some quinacridone red. So what you're seeing on the screen here, this is what I originally sketched several weeks ago on the iPad. That's how it's supposed to look. We'll see how close we get. You know, one thing I've noticed about having to not really paint, I actually haven't been learning that much from painting. It's the editing, the painting videos like this that has been teaching me a lot. You having to watch these over and over again while editing, it really kind of forces you to take a hard look at everything you're doing and figure out a better way to do it. Like, for example, if you've watched any of my videos, you've probably noticed that I never finish mixing all my paint and before I start actually putting the water down. And it's almost always a good idea to have all your paints mixed and ready before you put the water down. So normally the commentary I do for these videos would be pretty specific to whatever I'm doing, but usually the paintings that I'm working on actually I feel like there's information that I can share. Here's how I paint this bird. Here's how I paint this tree. That kind of thing. This is not one of those paintings. This is basically just going to be one technique over and over and over again, and it really doesn't require a lot of skill or practice or information to do it. So what I think I'm going to do this time is focus a little bit more, because otherwise I'll have absolutely nothing to say. I think I'm going to focus more on just kind of talking about the things that I'm interested in that's going on right now, and what I've been focused on the most is just the YouTube video content and everything that goes along with that. So just being a content creator on YouTube, I'm kind of new to it. And at the moment, like, I do painting to relax. It's not what interests me. It's more of just like a creative vehicle so that I don't go crazy. But like for the last week, I've been focusing a lot on social media, using it properly. So I'll probably end up talking more about that during this video. So if you think that's going to be a problem, just go ahead and mute me and turn on something else for a while. Have you ever noticed that every time you need to record, your neighbors decide to stand outside your window and talk to their dog? I have. I actually just got this weird mental image in my head of like someday them watching this video because I hit the big time and they're like, hey, that was me. Yeah, dude. It was. I'm not gonna tell you what he normally stands outside my window and says to his dog. It would be impolite. But let's just say I'm really happy it wasn't one of those days. Because that would not have turned out well. It's kind of funny when you're sitting here staring at an editing screen and recording voiceovers thinking like someday a whole bunch of people are gonna have watched this, so it better be good. I don't know. It's kind of strange for somebody like me that I really don't like talking very much. It's not my thing. I'm not a good communicator. I don't get a lot of practice at this kind of a thing, so I find this incredibly awkward and tedious, but I've tried without any voiceover, and it's just not the same. And the quality of the content and how much it's being enjoyed by other human beings is actually really important to me. Back to painting for just a moment. You'll see here I'm using the thirsty brush technique where you dry out all the bristles and then use it to soak up or pull the water back off of your painting for when you have way too much water on there, like you're seeing now. The weird thing is that as I'm watching this, I'm really becoming aware that I use the exact same brush for everything in this painting, which is, it's not uncommon for me, but usually the brushes I'm using are larger, so you can pull up more water, you can mix more paint, you know. With this one, like if you look now, I just, even when I was doing this, I was thinking to myself, like, I should just switch brushes. This is dumb. But I didn't. On a slightly different note, you'll notice here I'm switching up my brush technique and I'm holding it back towards the end. I've recently, it's come to my attention in someone else's video that there is a reason people hold brushes like that, and apparently it's because the larger the muscle that you're using to perform the action, the more control you have. So I find it a little bit awkward, and maybe this wasn't the perfect time to test it out, but I did want to test it out. And if you haven't tried it for yourself, I recommend it just to see if it actually does help. I'd like to point out that as much as I do like Canson Heritage, and this is the cold pressed 140 pound, I don't really care for the texture of it. It's extremely high quality paper. I just find the texture a little bit too smooth and even, and I'm actually used to using, I started off practicing on Strathmore 300, which is pretty low quality paper. It's, not even close to 100% cotton rag like the Canson Heritage. The thing is, like, I actually like the deeper, rougher texture of the Strathmore 300, and I'm looking for something that's good quality, 100% cotton rag that's closer to that type of texture. I haven't found it yet. I've only tried Canson Heritage up to this point. I think maybe I'll try some arches next. Maybe some Strathmore 500, something like that. Just, I've got to get something with a little bit deeper tooth, they call it. I'd also like to take this opportunity to point out that once again, I have put water down on the paper and am now getting around to mixing my paint. I do that just about every time. I really don't recommend it. As I've been moving everything around on my desk, changing lighting, camera angles, that kind of thing, I've noticed that every once in a while I find just the right spot for a light so that it reflects back on the camera. So if you look at the camera angle right here, you can see the light reflecting, and you can easily see exactly how wet the paper is. Now, unfortunately, I don't have my lighting set up so that I can see this while I'm painting, but it just now occurred to me that if you want to get a better idea of how wet the paper is, if you can get one light and put it in just the right spot, it'll let you know exactly how wet the paper is, and that really seems to help. I'd also like to point out, because I think it matters in this case, that the lights that are on my desk are being diffused by something I've covered up. It's actually, it's just a paper towel with painter's tape so that it stays in place. But I think it really does help change the lighting enough so that instead of getting those really harsh highlights that make it harder to see what you're painting, I think the diffusion over the light actually helps soften everything up enough so that you can tell how wet the paper is without being blinded, if that helps. One of these days I'll do kind of a behind the scenes type of deal where I go through what I've done to my desk, all the lighting, the camera angles, why I chose them, why I'm doing what I'm doing, how I've progressed from the start, all of that. Don't want to really get into it too much here because it's a little off topic, but I am planning that video for anybody that either wants to become a YouTube creator and doesn't think their setup looks right, or somebody that just wants to change their own painting setup, or let's just say art setup, so that it's easier to see what you're doing and maybe just wants some ideas for how to do it on the cheap. For all you YouTube content creators, I call this one the overhead hair cam. It's exceptional. So I'm sitting here supposed to be recording voiceover, and I keep finding myself going for like 2 minutes at a time just listening to the brush on the paper, and I find it so relaxing. I mean, it's not even binaural, but I still find it like really relaxing. I keep having to remind myself, you're supposed to be talking. Say something. This is the Facecam Nose Scratching Edition. Really, I deliberately left this in. I specifically included it. I almost got rid of it, and I was like, no, we'll leave it in and just remind them that you're a man of the people. You're just like them. So, I don't know if you caught this, but just a few seconds ago, while I was goofing around talking about something else, I added some ultramarine to the sap green and lemon yellow, just to kind of give it a little bit of a cooler tint. I was just trying to change up the color a little bit. I didn't want everything to be all one color. In the original sketch, if you look closely, there's about usually 2 or 3 different tint versions of each specific color block. Also, in case you're wondering, the answer is yes. I do realize that this piece of artwork does kind of resemble Ignignokt from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It's a coincidence, but I love that show, and I totally would have made artwork based on him if I'd actually thought of it first. I'm just now catching myself wondering if at any point YouTube ever gives out awards for the weirdest commentary in any painting video. If they ever make that a thing, I'm a win. For show. It feels like when you're doing commentary for any kind of a video, conventional wisdom would suggest that you should keep it on topic. So, for example, if you're making a painting video for YouTube, maybe keep the commentary to painting topics. But guys, that's so boring. I want to talk about other stuff. Every once in a while, I hear the paintbrush splashing around in the water, and I think to myself, oh, wait a minute. I don't have a water cam yet. Now I need one. This is a totally random note, but the main reason I haven't actually put a camera on the water side, on my right-hand side, is that all of the cameras are either directly centered or on my left as I'm sitting at the desk. And I'm not a filmmaker or anything like that. I've never been to film school. I don't do that, but I've watched enough videos of filmmaking on YouTube that I know that traditionally you're not supposed to do what they call break the 180 degrees. You're just basically for anybody that doesn't know what that is, you basically, if all of your cameras are on one side of your actors, you don't want to just randomly cut to something that's filmed from the opposite angle and maybe like showing from behind or something, because it can be kind of jarring, the transition. So that's a lot of the reason I don't actually have a water splashy cam because I would have to put it on the right side, and I know it doesn't matter, but in my head it does. So for anybody, I'm sorry, there probably will never be a water cam. So for anyone that is currently or is planning to be a YouTube creator in the future, as you're watching this sequence, like, notice all the cuts. one of the things that's nice about having so many cameras that you have access to when you're editing something like this is that it gives you a lot of options to, keep things visually interesting. You're supposed to cut every, you know, 15, 20 seconds or so. You kind of have to develop a feel for what the flow should be like, the speed, how often you transition, all that kind of thing. But one thing I will warn you about is the more cameras you have, the longer it takes to edit, and it can get real frustrating. So maybe work up to 4. I actually worked up to 4 cameras over a period of about 3 months. I think for the first month and a half at least, maybe even up to 2 months, I only used one camera. It was just a GoPro. On a technical note, I think personally one of the hardest parts of editing is not just sitting there tweaking things and moving things around for hours on end. To me, the hardest part is like views like this. I know I have to show the paint being mixed because that's a thing, but I don't like that angle as much as the one that you're seeing right now. This is shot with a Canon 80D with just a basic kit lens. It's a nice camera. You don't need anything nearly that nice. It's all about the sensor and the lens you're using. But I like this view so much better. It gets the job done so much better. You can see more detail. The color's better. The details are sharper. So every time I have to cut away from this view, I just cringe. It's like, I know I have to, but I don't want to do this. So here we're going to start painting the blue section of this, and you can see I'm grabbing some ultramarine. Going to start a fresh palette up here. I think I add some cerulean in just a second, a little bit of extra water, because again, I'm using a brush that's way too small for this. I should have switched to something that will pull up more paint just so I could mix faster, but I don't know if I was being lazy or stubborn. It could have, honestly, it could go either way some days. Like, just really sticking it to the man. I'll show you, I'm gonna use this tiny paintbrush the entire time. I'm the type of guy that uses the same stupid paintbrush for the entire painting, even if it doesn't make any sense. I look at it this way. It's kind of like the "hey kids, get off my lawn" move of the painting world, because that's basically who I am. Like, had I been born in a different generation, I would totally be one of those people that are like, I am not getting a cell phone. No one needs that. Black magic of the worst kind. So this is a perfect example of why you should set up your lights even if you're not actually recording this, even if you're just painting for yourself in your own room or whatever and you're not putting this on YouTube. I still highly recommend getting a light setup that allows you to see whether or not the paint is, or the paper is wet. Because if you look at this angle right here, you can see exactly how wet the paper is. It's very easy to tell. But if you look here, I'm having to look all over the place to try and figure out whether or not the painting or the paper's wet. Because like my lights are set up for the camera, not for myself. So at this point, what I'm going to start doing is you try scraping the brush, just using the side, like the flat side of it, just to give what I'm trying to do is I want just a little bit of texture. I want just a little bit of like a glaze coverage, like a thin coating, but I don't want it to be the exact same, just the thin, narrow line that, runs vertically. I want it to be a little bit wider, a little bit more random, a little bit more loose. So I would kind of did this at the end on most of the colors just to see if it helped. I felt like it needed to be blended a little bit. So this was my attempt to do that without having to resort to just using a wet brush and actually physically blending it. I thought this might be just a little bit more interesting. I'm not sure if it was, but it was more fun. So you might have noticed that on some of these, where the two colors meet, there's just a little bit of like a white space, dead edge. Um, I like that in there, but I knew I was going to cover it up with something else. I do just ink over the lines at the very end. So normally, if I wasn't going to do like a line, um, like a drawing at the very end, I would have stayed further away from the colors just to give a little bit more of a dead edge. But again, like I said, I knew for sure I was going to be going over it with a pen, so I just got close and figured it would get covered up. If you're wondering, the answer is yes. I am going for the Grizzly Adams picks up a paintbrush for the first time look. I think most painters are just far too clean shaven. Like the look I'm going for is like, I just walked out of the woods. From now on 20 year. Say, why does this giant toothpick have hair on one end? On a totally different note, I'm just listening, because I'm an audio nerd, I'm listening to the paintbrush and I'm thinking like, dude, there's no paint on that brush. You can hear it. Put paint on the brush, then move it around. It's like a step 1, step 2 thing. My inner critic was just kind of yelling at me for getting off topic again, but then I reminded myself, I actually did use the word paint and brush in that one. So it counts. I'm leaving it in. I think it would be hilarious to make a word cloud for this video, just so people can see it when it loads up right away and they can see what I'm going to be talking about, like what they can expect from this. Be like, paint, yep. Ultramarine, yep, good to go. Paul Bunyan, hair toothbrush? What? I think it's definitely time to add some additional production value using digital effects. Hairdryer cam. You like that? For anyone desperately needing to replicate that effect, that is Space Designer with the Ulm Chapel setting, which sounds suspiciously like the inside of a fuel canister. I specifically included this bit here just so everybody knows for sure what I look like when I get in and out of a chair. Behind the scenes. Okay, time to get back to work. Okay, so as you can see, this is just a basic fountain pen. It wasn't even that expensive. I think I bought it at like Fred Meyer, Kroger's, depending on where you live. It doesn't really, I can't tell if it's because the paint or the paper, but it actually had a lot of trouble putting ink down. I had to go over it several times. I actually wish I wouldn't had gone over as many times because at a few points in this, as I was watching it, I thought to myself, you know, I actually wish I would have left it a little bit rough and unfinished. And I kind of was telling myself, like, no, don't go over it again. It looks great. But, oh well. On a side note, I actually really like calligraphy. I'm not good at it. When I practice doing cursive, I actually have to have like, when you're in like elementary school and they have like the pictures at the top that go all the way around the walls up at the ceiling and they show you like how to make an A and a B. Like, I have to basically look those up on Google Images just to remind myself how to do, like, certain cursive letters, especially in capital. But I am going to be doing some of that on this channel a little bit later, now that I've got my desk and lighting set up. You know, I really like the whole thing, so I will be using this pen and others like it a lot more. I would normally would have used a different pen, but fountain pens are just so fun to use that I just decided to use this one instead of the other ones. By the way, if you're anything like me and you kind of have a little bit of OCD in your life, this last line right here was driving you crazy. Because I'm thinking to myself like, oh man, please don't tell me I forgot to fill in that line on camera. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. And normally this would be my favorite part, the untaping, but sadly on this one I just taped the corners because it couldn't possibly matter less, so a little anticlimactic. So in case you're wondering, I'm actually not obsessed with just moving paper around in front of my face for no reason. I was actually trying to see if the paint was dry because I have to, or the ink, because I have to flip it over and sign the back. Then I realized there was actually something already sketched out on the back and decided to sign the front instead. Just in case any of that was odd or confusing. Alright, that brings us to the end of the video. If you made it this far, thanks, I appreciate it. If you liked any part of this, just go ahead and leave a like. If you have any questions or comments, put them below in the comments section. If you want more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. There will be more. Thanks. Have a good day. Dude, roll the music. No, the music.